I'm Jeff Delbel. I'm here to talk about, I guess, the last two books primarily. I published, as Ron said, the book Salvatore in 2017. It actually hit the, it was about, it'll be 2 years in November since that was published. And now Kate's Gift is in the works. My editor is here tonight also, David Connolly, who I'd like to recognize because I think he's probably the only one in the room with a Pulitzer Prize. So, I've started writing after I semi-retired in 2008. I really couldn't focus on what I wanted to do until then. It was one of the reasons I retired. And it's been an interesting journey. What I found was that I needed to focus, obviously, on what I was interested in and what I felt I could do. So I'm primarily interested in what I refer to as character-driven novels. I'm interested in relationships, what's going on in people's heads, on how they're feeling, much more than plot, although obviously there has to be a plot, but the actual characters are, to me, more interesting. This, I found as I went along, is among the least popular forms of writing out there, particularly for my target audience, which is middle-aged men who have a tendency to read primarily in nonfiction. Getting middle-aged men to read in fiction is not always an easy thing. That doesn't mean there aren't some readers out there that are doing this, but I guess what I'm pointing out is that I chose an unpopular genre with a very, very small target audience. And I'm glad I did, because that's what I can relate to. So as I read tonight, please try to keep that in mind. Also, if you will forgive me when I go into a little bit of what I wrote in Kate's Gift, okay? I don't have a female voice, and I'm not going to try. I've been through too many audiobooks where a male reader then goes off into sort of a female voice and tries to do that kind of, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not that skilled, okay? Let me start then with Salvatore, and if this is redundant to any of you, if you've heard a little of this before, I apologize, but I think it's important to sort of dive in. I also like to use, from my background and from for other reasons, I like to use things that go a little deeper if they can be dug up, particularly in sort of a metaphoric way. And I'll point some of that out as I do some of this. But here we go from Salvatore. "Get out of the way," Salvatore commanded. A tall, big-bellied man wearing an oversized Hawaiian shirt and knee-length Madras shorts stood mindlessly blocking the hotel doors. Reading glasses rested on the tip of his nose as he perused the racing form, circling his bets with a pencil. An elderly woman pulling an oversized suitcase struggled to maneuver around him. "I said get out of the way." The gambler lowered the pencil, licked his upper lip, exhaled, and turned to confront the man who dared try to boss him. His face sobered. He folded the paper, strolled to a nearby corner, and glanced back. At 6'4", with the build of a gladiator, Salvatore Esposito was not one to mess with. Even a numbskull could see that. Salvatore glared into the gambler's eyes. The man casually placed the pencil behind his ear. He paused and cracked a smile, then tipped his purple Panama hat and swaggered off. A little later, "Come on, Sal. Let's go, we're running late." Angelo Costello hadn't worked for Sal long, but he was a good fit and had quickly learned how seriously Salvatore took his schedules. "Yeah, Ange, let's go," Sal said. We move on just a bit. They get into a limousine. There's a little here, etc., but they're in the thing and they're on their way to their destination. The limo glided along the side of the bay. Sal watched the slight chop of the wave. A great blue heron slowly flapped its broad wings as it glided high over a cluster of nose-diving cormorants. The sky mixed bits of bright blue between dark gray clouds. Sal knew there would be a downpour that afternoon. There always was in August, but this was coming early. The palms began to sway, and jumbo raindrops dimpled the water. "This weather is bizarre, Ange." The sprinkling suddenly changed into a drenching downpour. The windshield wipers couldn't compete, and the driver pulled to the shoulder. Sal listened to the roar of the rain on the metal roof and sipped his whiskey. "This is like a monsoon," Angelo said. "When were you in a monsoon?" Sal asked. "Years ago, I was in India for a while in college. Never seen rain like that. This stuff, off and on, day after day, until it just shuts off." "But the green, Sal, you've never seen such green. Unbelievable. You'd like it." Sal's face soured. "I mean it, Sal. I think you'd like it." "The last place on earth I care to see is India, Ange. I can't stand the smell of curry, and being crowded just pisses me off." "I think you'd like it if you actually saw the place. You're not listening, Ange. I've got no use for anything Indian." "Why?" "I've got my reasons." Ange knew he'd hit a nerve and let it go. Salvatore is, as my friend Dr. Garlick has pointed out in the back of the book, is really sort of an odyssey, and it's kind of a hero's journey. So one of the things that you know, if you know that particular story format, is that Sal's going to India, okay? I mean, the last thing he wants to do, that's where he's going. So you can kind of get familiar with that in a bit. And there are Indian themes. I was fortunate enough to visit India on 3 different occasions for, in each case, about 2 weeks to a little bit more. And I learned an enormous amount because we were there actually on a sort of quote-unquote educational mission. So we were traveling all over the place, seeing a lot, from going from city to city, visiting schools, on the road, and we saw stuff that tourists wouldn't normally be shown in the context. And also then we're able to learn things that were very important from this standpoint. Let me reread just one sentence that I just read, okay? And try and use that as kind of a launching point for the metaphor. "A great blue heron slowly flapped its broad wings as it glided high over a cluster of nose-diving cormorants." There's more going on there than just the scene that is laid out there. In India, as you probably know, there are many, many deities. Or maybe there's one, okay? Or maybe there are 350 million. In India, you don't get straightforward answers. It's one of the beauties of the place in this regard. But of the deities, the major deities, one that stands out, okay, is an important factor in this particular sentence, okay? First of all, what do you have going on? If you've ever seen a bunch of cormorants going after whatever fish are available down there, they're just tearing each other apart to get at whatever they can get at. And actually in India, to be called a cormorant is a big insult. It's just a scrambling for stuff that goes on in that kind of environment. Overhead, however, you've got the great blue. And the great blue is just over it all, high in the sky, flapping along and moving as it wishes without any of the disruption of what's going on down below. In folklore in India, the goddess that represents what really makes life meaningful, she's also the consort of the god Brahma, who is the creator god. She is his consort. Well, he can create, but he's not able to give meaning to any of the creation. That all comes from her. Music, art, literature, anything that would be seen as value from a human being standpoint, okay, comes from this goddess. Her name is Saraswati, okay? And if you've ever seen her, I do have a picture, but it'd be kind of hard to see from there, but I can try and hold it up and get a little bit of a visual here. This is what she looks like. She's almost always seen with a sitar. And of course that represents the music, etc. And again, she's what gives it all real value. Now the cormorants aren't really going after real value, as you can tell, but what is the then next step in terms of the heron? When Saraswati travels, she's carried by a heron. She's delivered from place to place. So below, with this scrambling kind of thing that, you could take in whatever metaphoric way you want about how we live, what we do, American business, as we'll see with Salvatore, okay? Above it is the meaning, something far more valuable flying above. And what I've tried to do with this is lay this out so that the reader might see that this is going to be Salvatore's challenge. It's going to be his journey. He's got to go from Cormorant up to the world of Saraswati. He's got to find the value, and that's very much what the book is about as he goes along. Now, Sal is a rough and tumble guy. There's a lot of adventure in this book. Things are going here and there and all over the place. But again, that's been set essentially as the goal, essentially, that Sal will set for himself in this. Okay? I hope that it gives you a little idea of what I try to do. I've done the same with Kate and with Jimmy Eagleson. I like to use what I refer to as bookends. I like to have certain things happen at the beginning of the book that then repeat and come back around and have a somewhat different meaning at the end of the book. With Salvatore, I can tell you this, and I won't tell you the resolution to it, but the first thing we hear from him is get out of the way, and he's commanding it. Well, the last thing we hear in the book is very different, okay? And that's where the book has taken him in that regard, okay? Now, a few other things. As I mentioned, we're going to go to India, so let's go to India. This next part is hard for me to read because I'm an animal lover, but it is actually something I saw, and that really is ingrained in my head, and I took notes on it after I got back to the hotel. We were in Varanasi, which is for the Hindus the most holy city on the Ganges, and we were going on the boats, just getting ready to board one of the boats on the Ganges. And with all of the confusion that was going on, it was all great, incidentally, just this kind of mesh of things going on and so much activity. I saw the following thing, and I put this in as Sal is watching this occur. Here we go, and please, as I said, it's tough in a certain way, okay? Sal waited near the river's edge. The screeching and yowling from a band of feral dogs seized his attention. He watched as the young pack members ganged up to depose their spent leader, biting and chasing the skinny old top dog with a half ear and white fur around his mouth. They mercilessly tore at his legs and ears, sinking their teeth deep before viciously jerking their heads and ripping his flesh. He fell onto his back. They continued to tear at him. He bled and yelped helplessly. Sal looked around. No one else was paying any attention. Finally, one dog pulled back and howled. The others left their victim, jumping and barking as they swarmed around their new kingpin. The pack ran off. The old dog struggled to his feet, licked an open wound, and limped away alone. I think probably the metaphor, particularly given that we're looking at sort of an American business thing that's going on in the book, which I should have prefaced to you, sort of stands out. It's an irony. It's something, as I said, I saw that you see that goes on, and it's so clearly dog eat dog, that it's not even. It's almost silly to even say that that's what's going on there. And Sal says something at the end of this. He simply whispers something. He says, "The strongest mongrels end the cruelest, old dog." And that has a couple of different meanings that can be read in a couple of different ways in terms of what he might be saying, okay? Which I won't try to explain. I'll allow that to the reader. They get on the boat. They're going down the Ganges. They're being shown the Ghats. And they're remarkable. It's a remarkable place. However, one of the things that you see, you get out on this boat and all of the celebration, people are bathing, they're doing their clothing, they literally are burning corpses on the steps of the most famous of the Ghats for that purpose. And then as you look along, you see these pipes coming into the river, and there's essentially raw sewage going right into the Ganges, and it's such an interesting contrast that it hit me as something that where else would you see this? This is really peculiar. So this is essentially what this little passage is about, and Ange with Sal while he's in India. And there are two other people here, two women. One is Radha and the other is Sita, okay? I chose those names. They are integral people in the book. I chose those names because they are mythical names, right? Radha is the consort of Krishna, Lord Krishna. She puts up with a lot because this guy is really having a hard time controlling himself, okay? And then Sita is the consort of Rama. And the Ramayana or the Ramayana, depending upon how you wish to, that's another thing I found out in India. You know, you ask them, how do you pronounce this? Yes, sir. Well, is this right or is that right? Yes, sir. You know, and they're not just saying, say it any way you want, essentially is what they're basically saying. It's confusing because in the Western mind, we like to have something defined. Okay. Radha is speaking, and there's been a comment made about the state of the water. Yes, it is very much polluted, mostly from the waste dumped into it, Radha said. India is a place of much inconsistency in the same waters where holy remains are spread and people bathe to cleanse their souls, untreated sewage flows. Radha pointed to an open drain pipe oozing brown muck into the water. But it is said that there is a special gift in the river that keeps it free of disease. The water would need a major endowment, Angie says. Okay? They're called bacteriophage, Ange, Sal says. They're microorganisms that live on bacteria. This river is one of the few places where they replicate on demand. The bacteria in the water are over 50 times what is considered safe, but there are nearly equivalent bacteriophages to reduce their effect. Okay, everybody's kind of a little stunned here because this isn't the way Sal usually talks, okay? This is the first time I have heard you speak like a doctor, Sita says. My mistake, Sal said and grinned. You see, Ange, it's like American business. For every little piece of shit, there's a little shit-eater waiting to gobble it up. Radha and Ange broke into laughter. Sita looked away and shook her head in disgust. Well, that's what they told me in med school, Sal said. Sita fought the humor, lost, and cracked up. It's not all about tearing dogs. Okay, that's what I'm pointing out here, I guess, in this regard. But also, that is really kind of an interesting part of the Ganges, that these things do exist. And, of course, Salvatore would know this. And Sal, for those of you who haven't read the book, is one of these rare, brilliant human beings who just doesn't give a shit. I mean, you have to live Sal's way or no way. And he's also not only an attorney by having graduated from law school, but he also is a medical doctor, having graduated from medical school. And there's an explanation of how that all happens and why he doesn't bother practicing either one. He just goes out and makes a fortune on his own, essentially, in that regard. Okay? Well, at the conclusion of Sal, there are a lot of things left unexplained. The flight of Jimmy Eagleson takes place in 2003. Salvatore takes place in 2008. If you remember, 2008 was a big year. Las Vegas is still not recovered from it because we had a big, big crash in 2008. Lots of people lost fortunes. The amount of discretionary money that was, I'm seeing that. I went to Las Vegas for the first time last year to go to a wedding, and they're still recovering from this, and they're still talking about it because discretionary income went down so much. Well, that's when Salvatore takes place, 2008, and that's part of what drives the drama, that, in fact, he's going to have to deal with this. He and his close friends, and as I said, these are novels that are driven by relationships, which come through, I think, in this regard. Now for Kate's gift, we go forward. All right? We go forward to now, maybe, next year, the year after. I'm not going to identify the specific year because I'm not sure that's as important as just knowing that you're a good distance, at least 10 years, maybe 12, from Salvatore, from the book Salvatore. And here's the scenario, and this shouldn't destroy the book in any way. It's essentially what will be on the back of the book, so you could read it anyway in this regard. Kate's dying, okay? She's terminally ill. She knows it. She's been taking all kinds of treatment. And she decides that she's no longer taking any more treatment, and she's no longer doing any more of the pills, and she's just going to go. Now, Kate in both books, preceding books, is a psychologist, a very good one, a very slick sort of psychologist in that regard, and she's also become quite Eastern in her orientation. So she meditates regularly, and she's looked into Eastern philosophy and religion very heavily, and she's finding a great deal of comfort in that, and she's ready. And she's, in the beginning of the book, she's trying to tell Sal, this is not a sad thing. Stop this nonsense. I'm going. It's the way it is. It's what I want. I'm ready. You gotta believe me. You know, she's having a hard time with this. And so Sal says, well, what can I do? What are you gonna, And she says, I want you to call everyone together, the whole gang, all of the characters that were major characters in the previous books, so that they can be here with me. And if you've seen the previous ones, Sal has a big lodge that was originally Jimmy Eagleson's. Kate's got a cottage next door. And Sal's put up another structure that's on the other side, and not by accident, on the other side also of the lodge that he's living in. So he says, okay. He gets on the phone, and he begins the phone calls. And the drama begins from the standpoint of getting all of the close friends together to be with Kate. But Kate is not bringing them there to mourn. She's not bringing them there to feel sorry for her or to go through any of that kind of stuff. She didn't want anything to do with that. She's a psychologist. She's bringing them there to do sessions because her last gift to them is going to be to pull out whatever baggage is left within these people so that the rest of their lives can be free of whatever they are carrying around that's deeply pushed down in their guts, etc. Okay, so if you can get the picture. And she's got it all planned, and she has no idea the can of worms she's opening up. These guys have baggage. And she's going to be yanking it out, and in the process, of course, she's going to break all the rules, I think, pretty much, as far as I can tell. She'll get you relaxed at the sessions, but she's not restricting anybody's drinking, and of course, if you've read the other two books, you know that wouldn't be possible with these guys anyway. But nonetheless, that's basically what the scenario is about, and as it develops, of course, and then tensenesses and all kinds of little things that have happened get resolved to a certain extent. But the book is essentially also very much about death and about the process of death and the process of accepting not just our own death and all the rest of that, but the courage of her going through this in the way that she goes through it. Incidentally, I got the idea for doing a book of this type from my brother, who actually did this. He just decided not to take any more treatment from a bunch of things that were wrong with him. I think he had about everything wrong with him. And he called all of his siblings and had us all go and hang out with him, and within a few days he was gone. And we got to do discussions and talk about things and spend some time with him, and nobody was sitting around feeling, oh, poor Jim. There was none of that going on. This was really a very positive thing. And so that's essentially what's going on with Kate. Now, one of the characters that doesn't make it in Salvatore, who is in the first book, is back in Kate. Her name is Gail. She's a bartender in New York City and was a very good friend of Jimmy Eagleson's. All right? And what I want to read for you is something that Kate is presenting to Gail. Now, they're sitting on the porch of the lodge overlooking Lake Champlain, and for the second time, this big fish jumps. Okay? The first time it jumps, Kate giggles, and Gail says, what's going on? And she says, nothing. Second time it jumps, Kate laughs, and it's essentially a stimulant into a mind thing and a memory that Kate is bringing back to give an explanation of where she's coming from. Okay? So let me, okay. Kate paused, slowly sipped her coffee, and looked back at the lake. One more thing, okay? Remember, I'm not trying to do this in a female voice. I'm not going to even give that a remote shot. So please be kind to me, because this is not going to be read the way that it probably should be in that context, at least. And look back at the lake again. And look back at the lake. Again, the large fish jumped. She laughed. Okay, what's the joke? Gail said. No joke, just a coincidence. Grinning, Kate turned to Gail. Okay, I'll tell you what was on my mind a minute ago. Bear with me. It may sound a little syrupy, especially for a practical gal like you. Syrupy is fine with me. Pour it out, girlfriend. Kate sat reflecting, then she broke her silence. I've counseled many others in my situation, organized many support groups. When I first learned of my condition, I was disappointed, not angry, just disappointed. I was supposed to have a lot of life in front of me, just like those I'd counseled. I knew I would probably go through all stages before acceptance, just like them. And there was always some hope, just like them. But I knew the odds were slim. My condition is 95% fatal. So I consciously pushed myself through the denial and anger quickly. My meditations helped. I wanted to get to a peaceful acquiescence ASAP. One day I hopped in my microbus and drove off. No plan, I'd just drive. I found myself heading for a woods I used to visit when I was young. There were only 2 other cars in the gravel lot next to the trailheads. Weekdays were usually that way. I tried to remember which path I particularly enjoyed. Then I recognized it. It seemed almost unchanged from my last visit over 30 years ago. I hesitated for a moment. The path was rough. I was wearing a long skirt. My shoes were flat but open-toed, and I knew there'd be low branches and sharp rocks. But I went ahead. After all, I could always go back. This is where the syrupy might come in. Gail sat back, smiling and nodding. Keep going. All good so far. Gail, I felt the noises and smells of the woods welcomed me. You know, sort of like an old friend making contact after a long absence. It was as if I had been there yesterday. I recognized some familiar landmarks as I made my way toward a small lake where I used to sit and think. The bright blue sky and light breeze almost made me forget what had brought me there. Almost. I sat on a large rock. I had never paid much attention to it before, though it had probably been there for millenniums, but right now it was my new perch. My feet touched the shore below, within inches of the water. After gazing at the woods and sky, a smell drew me to look down directly in front of me. A large dead fish floating belly up was slowly drifting past. It was bloated, with white open pink gills and large swollen eyes, and it had turned a morbid off-white. It floated in the center of a murky cloud that traveled with it, hiding any view of what was beneath. Even at several yards, the stench was overwhelming. It upset me. I sprang up and hurried along the trail. I couldn't get the image of that fish out of my mind. I stopped and cried uncontrollably, bawled and bawled. I don't know how long, but I think I cried myself out. I felt relieved. I walked on, watching birds, swaying evergreens, and chipmunks, and all sorts of other life. I sat in a clearing and looked at my hands. I focused on my blood veins still pumping away. And as I now do so often, I breathed in deeply, exhaled slowly, and brought myself into the moment. No depression from reliving the past or anxiety from fears of what might come, just the peaceful here and now. On the way back, I stopped and sat again on the old rock. The fish was gone and the water crystal clear. I gazed at the lake's bottom. I focused on a large snail. I remember it was brownish with swirls of black. It had climbed near the top of a submerged rock, very close to its destination, I thought. A rainbow trout whipped by, and with a swish of its tail swiped the snail loose. My eyes remained fixed on the snail as it slowly tumbled downward, drifting and blowing tiny bubbles until it landed on the gravel bottom. I watched it sluggishly right itself and then inch along toward another rock. I don't know if this will make any sense, Gail. For some time, I'd been picturing metaphors in almost everything I saw. The snail seemed to be telling me something. I didn't really know where it was heading. I perceived it to have a goal, but all it really did was keep going, just moving on, just doing whatever snails do. I thought of the dead fish. When I saw it, the fish was long gone. Only the wasting matter was left behind, and then that was gone too. But before it had lived, like that spirited trout and the snail, life didn't end. And once again, our jumping friend, Gail says. Exactly, Kate sipped her coffee. I'm not afraid of death, Gail, although I'm not crazy about the timing, Kate chuckled. In fact, I'm actually curious. I'm fascinated that the two most important events of our lives, the time we were born and the time we die, are experiences we know so little about. We watch others, but we can't possibly know what they're really going through, and they can't tell us, for some things are far beyond words. So we project what their experience must be, like giving a snail a destination. Soon I'll know. I will have done it, my last and most important act, and then life and I will move on together. That's the essence of where she's coming from and what she is trying to get in everyone else's mind. And of course, as soon as these sessions begin, the reader probably is going to almost forget that Kate's dying, because the drama takes over with everybody else in such a way that it really gets to be a drive of a different type, et cetera. How are we doing on time? Oh. How about if I read one final thing here and then I'll open up for questions? Is that okay? Okay. Let me get this in order. It's a bit out. Now, at one of the sessions, I may be missing a page. If that's the case, I can't do this. But at any rate, at one of the sessions, Stash Kate's question to the group is to unload something they had done that hurt something or someone very much, that they remember and that bothers them. Okay? And Stash has, here we go, okay. Stash is up. Stash's number is up. And the thing that's interesting to me about the way these sessions came out, is that they start with these small things that are grinding on people that happened in the past. And then eventually when it gets to the big stuff, it's big. And when that comes out, it's in that, you know. This is Stash speaking. I don't know that I can do Stash as well as Stash could do Stash, but I'll give it a shot, okay? Stash doesn't talk exactly like the rest of us, okay? I've been thinking about my pop for the last few days. There's no painting of him anywhere like that one of the old man. And he points to Jimmy Eagleson's old man on the wall in the lodge. I only got a couple of old black and whites. Stash paused. I was pretty hard on him. Figured he was lazy and all. But now I'm coming to think he did the best he could. You remember, he didn't always have a job and we were real poor. Stash looked at Sal. Sal nodded. We lived in an old house. The porch was falling down and the roof leaked. In my room, I had 3 of them big tomato cans to catch the dripping, and when it rained hard, I couldn't sleep. But we had enough to eat most times. When I was 11 or 12, the other kids had them 10-speed bikes. You know, the ones with the handlebars that swoop under, looking kind of like ram's horns? Well, I didn't have a bike. I wanted one real bad, but there was no way we could afford one, and I didn't have a job or nothing yet. One afternoon when I got home from school, my dad took me to the side of the house and surprised me. He was so proud. He'd gone out and he'd found me a bike, but I was disappointed and pissed. He bought an old 3-speeder that came with that little lever on them old-style handlebars that stick right out at you. And it was a girl's bike with them low curved bars so you could hop on if you were wearing a dress or something. Thinking back on it makes me feel like shit. He must have saved for weeks to buy the thing. He could see I was disappointed and just went back into the house. I thought on it a little and followed him in. I told him I really liked it and thanked him. I said it was the best bike in town. He smiled, though I don't think he believed me. He watched from the porch while I took it for a ride. Even then, I was a big fellow for my age, so none of the kids who saw me said nothing to my face. But they smirked and made signs with their hands to each other when they thought I couldn't see them. When I got back, I hid the bike behind the house, told my dad I didn't want nobody stealing it. I think he bought it. He was smiling. Next day, I walked to school. When I got home, my dad was on the porch. He asked me why I didn't ride my bike like the other kids. I made up some crap, but I knew I was going to have to start riding it to school or I'd hurt Dad's feelings again. But I didn't want to. So I rode it over to Sally's house. You remember any of this, Sally? Sal nodded. Sure do. Well, Sally cleared it so I could leave the bike behind his pop's store. It was right on the way. So for a week or two, I rode the thing as far as the shop, hit it, and picked it up after school. Then one day I rode into my yard and saw my dad on the porch. He looked away. I thought he might be crying. So I put the bike away and took my time before I went to him. When I finally walked up to the front stairs, I could see his eyes were red and he'd been blowing his nose a lot. Mr. Esposito had a job for me today, fixing some things, he said. Saw your bike behind his shop. He said you've been leaving it there for a while. Stosh paused. You didn't have to lie to me about it. I don't seem to ever be able to do the right things for you or your ma. I ain't a smart man, and I never had a good job. I wish I was different, but I just don't seem to ever get things right. You can throw the crap bike out if you want. I don't think I ever felt so low. He did everything he could to make me happy, and I couldn't see nothing but what the other kids might be thinking. Stosh pondered. Kids are tough, though. They'll talk behind your back, keep you out of their cliques and clubs and shit. And you want to impress the girls. When you're that age, them things make your world, you know? And I needed to be part of it all. I should have got past that. Thank you. Now, questions, if anyone has anything that might be of, please, ask me anything.
Well, I don't know if you said this yet, Jeff. When does that book come out?
We're hoping to have the book out in the spring. We're working on that. It has a lot of complications. It's a complicated book, and it's dealing with a complicated topic, and I don't want to rush it. So David's been of a great help to me, but hopefully we'll have it out in the spring. We're shooting for that. Yeah, Susan?
I was going to say, I know from many of the books how close this group of people are. And I'm wondering if some of them at least have to be dragged kicking and screaming to Kate's therapy sessions. You know, if they want to humor her, I'm sure will want to be with her as she's dying, but do they really want to do this?
Yeah, they don't know they're going to sessions until they get there. She keeps that card held very close. But yeah, there is difficulty getting, in fact, in the beginning of the book, and I hope this doesn't blow anything, but you don't really know if Stosh is coming at all. Yeah. Okay, and there are reasons for that develop as she's pulling this stuff out of them. But these people are very close. And of course, Sal's making the argument as it goes along, look, this is Kate, this is it. You know, get your ass here. And so they wind up converging and getting there. But yeah, there's reluctance. There's no question about it. Yeah.
Yeah, Kate's section, which I absolutely loved. Her
Thank you.
explanation of how she was facing her fate was very beautiful, really. And also the
Thank you very much.
Yeah. The last section, about remorse and I mean, that sounds like an HBO series or something. People, having to pony up there at the end in front of their friends is pretty. I mean, it's almost funny.
Yeah.
But it's really excellent. So yeah.
I don't think it's going to be an easy book to read. It will not be as popular as Salvatore by any means. I know that. And so the point is right now to get it right and have the courage to put it out, in that regard. But thank you. Thank you for what you said. This is the last book in the series. Incidentally, with the thing with Stosh, there's a resolution of what happened with the bike. I didn't read that part. But it's not just left like that. And with almost all of the things that comes out, there's a resolution. Things aren't quite as bad, and things turned out better than where I left that particular piece off. I should have probably printed more off here so I could read, but I'm working from, again, my computer files for Kate at this point. Yeah.
Are you planning another series after this?
Not another series, but another book. Yeah.
Or the series?
Pardon?
Just a book, okay.
Yeah, as a few of you may know, I don't know, I spend almost as much time in Panama as I do in central New York now. And I have been researching a book that's, the operating title is Embera, and that's one of the 7 indigenous populations of Panama. And they're a very interesting group. I've been able to get into the rainforest with them several times, and you can too if you want to go and visit them. It's funny too. Also, if you ever see Morgan Freeman has a series out called The Story of Us, and in one of them he actually goes into the village where I've come to know some of the people, and it's an interesting. But the idea of this is to take somebody who's been through this very pristine, almost Rousseauian sort of life in terms of being raised, and then pull them out and throw them into all the shit that happens in Panama historically. When I wrote Sal, I think what someone had told me I had done, one of the readers said, you've written Godfather meets Life of Pi. Okay. And I think that's fair. I don't know. In this case, I think what we're looking at is Forrest Gump meets Noriega. Except for it's not really Forrest Gump. This guy's just innocent in going through the process. So I've been researching that rather heavily. And the way I see it, the characters from the Jimmy Eagleson series may be part of it, not as actors particularly, but as storytellers. I may have them tell the story, okay, and in a transition away from here and into this other book. But at this right now, getting Kate finished and in the shape that we wanted in is the real main focus. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Dr. Garler?
3 different books,
Yeah.
in the series. Can you say something about the experience of what it was like to be immersed in writing, the difference between Jimmy Eagleson, Salvatore, and Kate, what that experience was like for you?
Yeah. I think, first of all 3 books are very different in certain ways. There's a commonality to them in that one of the messages of the books is that you don't really know what's going on. I mean, we make a lot of judgments and guesses about what's actually happening around us, and we ruminate a lot, and we create these scenarios that never were. And in all of these books, you've got some of that going on, that we're only operating with what we really know, and that's not a lot. It comes right down to what's going on in our lives. And that can affect our lives in a very negative way. But aside from that, they're very different books. I mean, Sal is an odyssey. Jimmy is more like a screenplay. And as we found out in meeting with David and talking to David, Kate reads very much like a play, almost like a stage play. So the switch, I think, comes from, first of all, not wanting to write the same book twice. But the focal characters are very different, too. I mean, Jimmy Eagleson is very different than Sal. And Sal, of course, is Sal. And Kate is she's the brains of the outfit. She's the heart of the outfit. She's the one who puts things in perspective in a certain way. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to write, because it's from her perspective. Obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but I'm not a woman. I can't do a woman's voice. So I have to really focus in order to try and be not laughable writing a female role in this, okay? I mean, I really have to work on that, and I need help with it, and I get help with it in that regard. The characters to me are real. I mean, these guys exist, and not just in dreams per se, but I think we've talked about this. They're friends. I mean, they're someplace you can go in your own mind when you're just kind of processing, et cetera. These guys are there. I mean, they're my buddies. They're my friends, and I think that helps a great deal in and that is what making it hard to close out this series, because I don't want to let them go. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but it's they're all different. I don't want them to be the same, and at the same time, the continuity again isn't the plot, isn't the format the plot's presented in. It's the characters and the relationship between the characters, and that maintains through all 3 books, I hope. Okay, that's the goal. So, yeah. Anyone else, anything? No? Thank you very much.